Now, I want that president to quit talking to something that I don't know anything about and start doing something about what's bothering me down here. This is hunger, unemployment, poor housing, bad schools. And so far, all we've got is a lot of hot air. We haven't got nothing.
Who speaks for the Negro community? The obvious answer is that no one speaks for the Negro community, any more than any one person or organization speaks for the white community. That's part of what makes it difficult to know how Indianapolis's 125,000 Negro residents really feel about their city. Even if you listen to several leaders, it's still difficult. A speaker can say one thing and mean another. A listener can hear something entirely different. It happens in the best of families, and the communications problem in a city is multiplied by the number of people involved and multiplied again by the social and ethnic differences that exist.
The black community are tired of being singled out.
As we at Channel 6 deal, as we must, with the complex and combustible racial issues in Indianapolis, we find ourselves continually asking, are we doing an accurate job of reporting to the entire community the feelings and aspirations of the Negro minority as well as the white majority? Several months ago, our concern about the apparent racial tension in this community led us to commission a professional research firm, Frank and Magid Associates, to make a study of the Negro in Indianapolis. The results are now in, and we'd like to share them with you. To tell you more, here's Howard Caldwell.
The survey conducted by Frank Magid's organization included 450 Negroes and 400 whites. They were selected from among the adult population of Marion County by what are called stratified random sampling techniques. Under the most conservative conditions, Magid says, the size of the sample used provides results within a confidence limit of 95% and a margin of error of less than plus or minus 5%. That means the findings of this survey can be considered quite accurate. One purpose of the Channel 6 survey was to determine the basic social and economic characteristics of the Negro in Indianapolis. In many ways, this part of the study bore out what we've been told before or assumed from our own observation. It showed, for instance, that the Indianapolis Negro is likely to have less education than his white neighbor. He's less likely to hold a clerical, sales, professional, or managerial job. He usually makes less money. He's more likely to live in substandard housing with overcrowding, bad plumbing, a leaky roof, and rats. The Negro is less likely than the white to be married, more likely to be divorced, and more likely to have children in school. He's also likely to harbor some feelings of being discriminated against because of his race. On the other hand, our survey also refutes some popular misconceptions about Negroes. For instance, the survey shows that far from being a transient, the typical Indianapolis Negro has lived in this community longer than the typical white person. Also, contrary to popular stereotypes, our survey showed that the Negro in this community is more likely than the white to hold a job. He's likely to work longer hours, and he expresses more willingness to work even longer hours if additional work is available. In addition, it might surprise some persons to learn that the concern of both Negro and white for a good house and neighborhood in which to live is roughly the same. And the Negro is more concerned than the white about the adequacy of street cleaning, trash and garbage collection, and storm sewer capacity. This is true regardless of the socio-economic status. Frequently in this program, we will refer to socio-economic status. Now, that's a classification based on the combination of a person's income, education, and occupational ranking. It's a useful and realistic index for interpreting tastes, preferences, and attitudes over a wide range of human behavior. The Negro is less successful than the white in terms of education, occupational attainment, and family income. Accordingly, he ranks considerably below the white on a composite scale of socio-economic status. In Indianapolis, Negroes are 3 times as likely as whites to be classified as low SES. Whites, on the other hand, are 4 times as likely as Negroes to be classified as high SES. Still, a majority of Negroes, 55%, live above the poverty level. Less than moderate circumstances might be an apt way of describing their economic situation. The popular image of Negro poverty envisions a dilapidated slum dwelling, overcrowded with many small children. However, contrary to this popular notion, poverty in Indianapolis in general is a phenomenon of the elderly, not the young. The Channel 6 survey shows that a low socioeconomic status and assumably much poverty is acutely a condition of the elderly Negro and to a lesser degree a condition of the elderly white. In planning for this study, the Magid organization anticipated a communications problem between blacks and whites and attempted to get Negro interviewers to conduct the survey among Negroes. They wound up, however, having to use some white interviewers in black neighborhoods. We'll let Frank Magid describe what happened.
Any time that an interview is conducted between 2 people, we find that one of the individuals, the interviewee, will size up the situation and, of course, respond according to certain cues that exist. In other words, the person defines the situation. It's what we commonly refer to as just definition of the situation. In the case of interviewing between Negroes and whites, we, of course, base this on the fact that we would get more candid responses if Negro were interviewing Negro. Actually, it turns out where we weren't able to do this, and we had to have whites interviewing Negroes, and after we analyzed the difference between the responses between Negroes and whites and Negroes, there was a considerable difference. This, of course, gives rise to what we feel is the most important result, or one of the most important results from the study, showing that because of the vast differences between the communication between the two, that there is a tremendous gulf, and actually it demonstrates a hidden void in communication between the 2 groups. It shows that the Negro and white cannot even talk together without distorting the meaning of the message.
Militancy has been identified as a key factor in race relations, and through a series of questions, the Magid organization attempted to measure black militancy in Indianapolis. Everyone has his own definition of the word militant, but in the Channel 6 study, a Negro is classified as low in militancy if he said he believes that Negroes should cooperate with whites, that they need not pressure the white community, and that they should put their faith in the good intentions of government. A Negro was given a high militancy score if he responded negatively or neutrally to these 3 areas of questioning, and he was given a medium militancy rating if he expressed some, but not complete, trust of the white community. On the basis of their answers, half of Indianapolis's Negroes were characterized as low in militancy. The other half, however, placed less than good faith in the intentions of the white community or the ability of the Negro to make progress without placing demands upon it. Still, the Magid staff found that only about 10% of the Negro population of Indianapolis could be called highly militant. Who are these people? Who are the Negro militants, or as they would prefer, the black militants? Our survey shows that the black militant in Indianapolis is just as likely to be a woman as a man. If anything, women are a bit more militant than men. The militant is likely to be young, and he or she is likely to be single or divorced. There is little relationship, however, between militancy and socioeconomic status. The militant is almost as likely to be poor as well-to-do and as likely to be a school dropout as a graduate. As part of his new self-assertion, the militant prefers to be called black. In our survey, among highly militant persons, black was the choice of 45%, Negro the choice of 38%. Among persons of low or medium militancy, however, 2 out of 3 preferred the term Negro. Only 1 in 8 favored black. In a search for what you might call the causes of Negro unrest, the Channel 6 survey devoted a great deal of attention to what Negro residents see as the specific problems of Indianapolis. Negroes responded strongest in 4 major areas. The problem of obtaining decent housing in a decent neighborhood, the economic situation, especially that of limited job opportunities, poor schools and education, and 4th, crime, violence, and delinquency. Each of these 4 areas was described as a major community problem by at least one Negro in 5. Poverty and welfare per se were seldom mentioned, and even in the presence of Negro interviewers, specific concern by Negroes over segregation, discrimination, or racial tension was voiced as a major community problem by only 17%. Concern over taxes and street repair is of even less importance. White residents of Indianapolis, on the other hand, identify community problems quite differently. Only 3% named housing as a problem, and only 1 in 100 whites considers job opportunities or unemployment as a problem. But 3 out of 5, 61%, named poor street repair as a major problem of the city. Frank Magid describes the meaning of these differences.
Well, actually, whites are, by their own admission, blind to Negro problems. The Negro expresses concern over certain basic areas such as housing and economic needs and a number of other problems. And these things are just incomprehensible to the whites. So there again is a significant gulf in terms of understanding or in terms of viewing the situation between the 2 groups of individuals.
One might argue that the economic, employment, housing concerns of Indianapolis Negroes are the circumstances of poverty and should not be attributed to race. But Magid's research shows that this isn't true. Whether poor or well-off, Negroes are 10 times as likely as whites to name poor housing as the most pressing problem. And a similar situation exists regarding dissatisfaction over job opportunities. As the Negro reaches middle and high socioeconomic levels, his spontaneous concern over poor job opportunities and unemployment is, if anything, greater than at the low socioeconomic level. Among whites, however, as you go up the socioeconomic ladder, expressed concern over employment drops to virtually nothing. The attitudes of the black militant are disproportionately important in a community because he's likely to be a leader. He's often vocal, if not articulate. He influences Negro opinion, though not all of it, and he's capable of inducing at least some Negro people to act. Like other Negroes, the black militant in Indianapolis is concerned about housing, jobs, and schools, but the emphasis and tone of his concern are different. Militants, for example, are 5 times as likely as non-militant Negroes to express concern over poor job opportunities. Conversely, they express no concern at all over the cost of living or high prices. Among non-militant Negroes, 30% are concerned about the cost of living. Unlike the average Negro, the militant expresses high concern over racial discrimination and tensions. And the black militant is more concerned than the average Negro about the inadequacies of the public schools and the educational needs of the Negro.
The militant, of course, by the very definition of the term, is more concerned than other Negroes about a number of problems. There is greater concern in a whole series of these, but if we were to single out one particular thing that was most important and of greatest concern to the militant, this would be the area of unemployment and or poor job opportunity.
Particularly significant in the questioning on specific problems was the fact that even Negro militants express comparatively limited concern with police-community relations. The Magid interviewers found that only 35% of the militants are very concerned with police relations. In contrast, 50 to 65% are very concerned with the employment situation, the schools, and housing conditions. From this, and despite some claims to the contrary, we must conclude that in Indianapolis at the present time, police relations are comparatively unimportant as a racial issue. In response to Negro interviewers, about 1 Negro in 4 claimed that the police often bother innocent people when they don't have to. Only 1 of 50 whites interviewed said this, indicating that the police treat Negroes differently from whites, or at least the Negroes believe this is true. But probably equally significant is the finding that large numbers of Negroes questioned believe that their neighborhood should have more police than it has now. Since Negro areas of a city tend to have the highest crime rates, and since Negroes are most often the victims of crime, the desire for better police protection is understandable. But surprisingly, even Negroes who perceive police harassment of innocent persons in their neighborhood favor increasing the number of local police in that neighborhood. As might be expected, a sizable majority of the Negroes questioned said they'd like to see the city employ more Negro policemen, and they'd like to see some of these serve in Negro residential areas. When Indianapolis Negroes express their concern about housing, they mean more than just the physical shelter. They include the characteristics of the neighborhood in which that shelter is located. The Negroes interviewed expressed a strong dissatisfaction with the dirt, garbage, and trash in their neighborhoods, and Negroes consistently show greater concern than whites with the adequacy of street cleaning, frequency of trash and garbage pickups, and the adequacy of storm sewers.
All of the data suggests that the living conditions of the Negro neighborhood is less viable than that of the white. Negro dissatisfaction with municipal services can't be attributed to their lower socioeconomic status. As a matter of fact, socioeconomic status is almost totally independent of either Negro or white satisfaction with city services. Predominantly, the level of dissatisfaction varies by race, and this finding strongly suggests an objective rather than a subjective differential in the quality of the city services provided to the Negro and the white areas of Indianapolis.
Regarding the housing itself, the primary problem with Negro housing is poor condition. 1 out of every 3 Negroes reported problems with the physical condition of the building in which he lives. Only 1 out of 4 complained of overcrowding. Negroes are 2 or 3 times as likely as whites to have rats, and they are 5 to 10 times as likely to have leaking roofs and plumbing problems. Despite the clear inadequacies of their housing situation, however, the Indianapolis Negro views it as improving. Significant numbers see their present housing as better than where they lived 5 years ago, and significant numbers anticipate moving to even better housing in the future. But overwhelmingly, it's the middle-class Negro who expects to live in better housing. The lower class is far less optimistic. A series of questions aimed at determining the extent of real or imagined discrimination in the sale and rental of housing showed that better housing is beyond the financial means of many Negroes. But when they can afford better housing, discrimination, real or imagined, takes on more but still secondary importance. When asked specifically whether racial discrimination affects the kind of housing they can get, about 1 Negro in 4 said it does, and 64% blamed limited finances. Questions regarding the public school showed that race has no bearing on parental concern with education. Regardless of race, the higher the socioeconomic status of a parent, the greater his concern with education. But Negro parents are considerably more dissatisfied than whites with the condition of the school facilities in Indianapolis, with the caliber of teachers and the degree of classroom crowding. 29% of Negro parents, when responding to a Negro interviewer, rated their neighborhood schools as worse than other Indianapolis schools, and among white parents the proportion was only 4%. 17% of Negroes considered their schools better than others, compared with 30% of whites. When asked to list some of the good things about the Indianapolis schools, more than 1/3, 39%, of Negro parents focused on the high caliber of school teachers, and feeling good or bad about the quality of neighborhood teachers, the Maggin organization found was the major factor affecting how Negro parents evaluated their schools. School integration per se doesn't seem to be a burning issue with Negroes in Indianapolis. When asked, 96% of the Negro parents said they feel improving the quality of education is more important than better integration. And after considering all the data on this issue, Frank Magid concluded that any public clamor over school integration is, in point of fact, almost exclusively a cry for better educational quality. In the area of employment, Channel 6 found that 3 out of 4 Negroes like their job. They expressed highly reasonable job expectations, and Magid said the behavior and attitude toward work expressed by Negroes seems no different from that indicated by whites. Despite relatively high unemployment among Negro youths, the persons having greatest difficulty finding productive work in Indianapolis are Negroes over 50 years of age. Only 1/3 to 1/2 of the Negroes questioned saw much chance of advancing to a better-paying job. And rightfully or not, the Negro perceives racial discrimination to be as great a barrier to his upward movement as limited education. Yet a majority of all Negroes questioned see the discrimination barrier as falling or at least not insurmountable. When asked if they believe that today a young Negro man can get ahead if he works hard and does well on his job, 56% said yes. Research throughout the country has documented a general tendency for members of the high socioeconomic group to be the most satisfied with their community. And this holds true in Indianapolis among white people. But for Negroes, there is no visible correlation between socioeconomic status and satisfaction with the community. Being a Negro seems to blot out the relationship one would expect. Most Negroes express relative satisfaction with life in Indianapolis, though, again, the percentage was smaller than for whites. And comparing this city with other areas, almost twice as many Negroes called it better as called it worse. But again, the black militants were the least satisfied. Among those Negroes who evaluate life in Indianapolis as better than elsewhere, their main reasons were the availability of work, comparatively higher wages, and their own satisfactory housing conditions. On the other hand, those who called life in Indianapolis worse than elsewhere focused most often on unsatisfactory housing and neighborhood conditions, poor job opportunities, and low wages. The Magid team evaluated all the data in an effort to determine what factors were most important in how all Negroes evaluated the city. And here's what they found. The most important factor, at least for parents, is the comparative standing of the neighborhood schools. This, in turn, rests on what parents perceive as the high professional quality of neighborhood teachers and the physical condition of the school buildings. Second in importance are factors associated with the neighborhood environment. 3 municipal services stand out: frequency of street cleaning, the adequacy of storm sewers, and the frequency of garbage and refuse collection. Satisfaction with housing per se ranks 3rd, with employment factors 4th. Here, the Magid people note that if unemployment increases in Indianapolis, the relative importance given the employment situation will increase also. About the person least satisfied with his life in Indianapolis, Magid drew some special conclusions.
What is important is that the militant, that is, the Negro who is most likely to spawn unrest, is the person who most frequently views himself as living in less than satisfactory conditions. His perception of these circumstances will in turn motivate him to react against the very things that he sees there. The militant is made not through poor training in the home nor poor discipline in the schools. Militancy is not a result of some sort of a conspiracy to create chaos or what have you in our cities. Rather, the making of the militant is a product of the American political system itself. That system has educated the Negro to believe in the responsiveness of the democratic processes. And in the face of this education, he sees those processes as having failed him. And in response to this failure, of course, he's turning to the streets.
The black militant feels the white community in Indianapolis is not listening, does not understand, and is not likely to respond to the problems of the Negro. To an extent, he's right, and the existence of a communications gap between the races in Indianapolis is borne out by the answers maggot interviewers got to the question, what does civil rights mean to you? The majority of both groups, Negro and white, conceive of civil rights in terms of generally equal opportunity or equal opportunity in jobs, education, or housing. But as many as one white person in 5 said they associate civil rights with negative connotations, unfair preference given to Negroes, forced mixing of the races, and the license to steal and riot. Again, both Negro and white generally recognize the rising level of Negro expectations, but 24% of the whites characterize these aspirations as unjustified or premature. In addition, large proportions, up to 45% of whites, attribute the cause of rioting to agitators, communists, and other troublemakers. Most Negroes believe the causes of rioting rest on the less than satisfactory circumstances of Negro life.
From the study's findings, it's pretty clear that 2 gulfs actually separate the Negro and white in reaching a common solution to the problem of unrest. The first one is the not insignificant proportion of whites who deny validity even to the ideal of Negro civil rights. And second, Negro and white have yet to reach a common definition for the basis of unrest. We'd say that white views in Indianapolis would tend to support the so-called repressive approaches to the civil rights problem, and to the extent that underlying social conditions contribute to racial unrest, this approach can only aggravate the unrest.
During the last 30 minutes, you've heard the highlights of a very detailed study of opinion in Indianapolis regarding the problems, rights, and attitudes of Negro residents. Much of what you've heard may not have been the least bit surprising. If you're Negro, it probably wasn't. If you're white, you may not have liked everything you heard. But in a way, it's more important for whites to know what the Channel 6 survey reveals than it is for the Indianapolis Negro to know. Understanding is essential to harmony and progress in a family or a community, and we at WFBM-TV feel that wide distribution must be made of this information if we as one community are ever going to bridge the communications gap that obviously now tends to divide us along racial lines. Such a gap keeps us from agreeing on the problems, let alone their solutions. In subsequent programs in the months ahead, we will present in greater depth reports of Negro attitudes regarding the public schools, employment, and neighborhood life in Indianapolis, and we invite you to watch.